Okay. Another partner is a huge partner. So basically I met Cody yesterday. It's a partner manager of Appfire, and I promised him to give a shout out.
Oh, okay.
So Cody, it's for you. Here, it's Andy Boyd, and he will talk about the best practices for migrating your Jira instance.
All right. All right, thanks everyone. Oh, hey, yeah. Woo! I was gonna introduce myself as like Mike Cannon-Brooks, but now that failed because you introduced me, so I'll have to use that joke the next time. Yeah, longer beard too. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Today I'm gonna talk about best practices for migrating your Jira instance. I'm Andy. I lead product management at Appfire. And before joining Appfire, I've been with Appfire for about a year. Before joining Appfire, I worked with IBM, and so I spent a lot of time in their Watson business and in their cloud business, helping customers move to cloud. So this topic of moving to cloud is something that's near and dear to my heart. But as it relates to Atlassian, why are we talking about migration? We're all aware that Atlassian has announced the server end-of-life support, right? I see. Yeah, duh. That's right. That's right. So just by a show of hands real quick, how many of you are planning a Jira migration in the next year or two? Most everybody. The hands are slow to get up. Nobody wants to volunteer. You don't have to be shy. Okay, so most of you. How many of you are sort of on the technical side of implementing the migration? A few of you, okay. How many of you are more on the business side, kind of the managerial? One or two very sheepish people. It's okay. All right. So my goal at the end of this talk is not to teach you how to do a migration. Really, you're going to be good. I need you to come up and engage more. Okay, so my goal at the end of this talk is not to teach you how to do a migration. It's just going to be two things. I'm going to help you understand some migration strategy as you plan your migration. And then the second thing is give you some resources that you can use when you go back to the office. So, as I said, I've been within the Atlassian ecosystem for about a year. And when I first heard the Jira end-of-life announcements, I was like, why is this so hard? Jira, you're just tracking work, tasks that need to be done. So this is kind of like just moving data from A to B. It shouldn't be that hard, right? I don't think that anymore, but I did think that. And the reason I don't think that anymore is I remember talking with some of our customers about how they were migrating or how they were using Jira in their day-to-day work. And I remember vividly talking with this customer. This story might sound similar to some of you. This customer was part of a large organization. He acquired a smaller software company, and they were trying to integrate the two businesses into one. And so I started asking him, how are you using Jira? And he said two things that really stood out. One was they had effectively a SLA with some of their customers. And so when one of their end customers submitted a support request or logged an incident or had a feature request, they had certain rules about how they had to respond to that. And so they codified all these rules through different workflows and approvals, et cetera, so that when that customer submitted that request or that incident, it would be routed appropriately. And if it wasn't, it would cost them real money because they weren't honoring the SLA. So that was thing one. Thing two is because they were also dealing with larger enterprise customers, they had a number of different security and compliance policies for cyber and security and regulatory risk. And if you know anything about that world, it's a wonderfully complex, painful world if you're developing software in it, but it's an important world. But if you know anything about it, you know that a lot of what those policies are about is you need to have a policy, and then you need to document that you're doing it. And so that's what this organization was doing. They had things like separation of responsibilities. So if I'm the one that writes, the code, I can't be the one that deploys the code. And so again, they had rules and processes set up in Jira to where when they would write the code, somebody else would deploy it, it would track those approvals, it would track that deployment. And so in this case, Jira was much more than just task tracking. It really was the central nervous system for how work flowed in this organization. As I've had more conversations with customers, I hear the same thing over and over. This isn't just tracking work. It really is the central nervous system for how that work flows. And it's a piece, really, of critical infrastructure. And so if your scenario is similar, and if we all agree that Jira isn't just tracking work, it really is critical infrastructure, how do you go about planning a migration for critical infrastructure? Just like any project that's critical to your business, you're going to define a strategy. How are people going to use this? What do we want it to look like when it's done? You're going to define the capabilities that you need. These are the software requirements that we have. These are the apps that we need to include. And of course, you're going to look at the cost. And one of the things that I mentioned is one of my top goals is to give you a couple resources. So you can all take out your phones. I see a few of you doing it right now. There's a link at the bottom of the screen. Can't see it real well, but you can zoom in. If you've never planned a project like this, we actually have a quiz and an ebook that helps you go about understanding how do you plan these critical projects. Same basic process. What are your goals? What are the capabilities you need? Help you understand and make the trade-offs with cost. So this is how you go about planning your project. Now, once you plan your project and you know what you want it to do, the next thing is you move into the execution phase. And we're going to do a little audience participation here, so if I could have everybody stand up. Just make sure you have enough room to do jumping jacks. I'm just kidding, you're not doing jumping jacks. All right. So then what I'm going to have you do is pretty much everybody over here sit down. You guys over there can stay standing. So you all can sit. All right, so this is the interesting thing about data migration projects. You can go ahead and sit down. So according to Gartner, now this is not Jira migrations, I don't know this data, but just data migration projects in general. According to Gartner, about 83% of data migration projects are over time, over budget, or fail outright. So what that means is the group in the corner, congratulations, you're getting promoted. All of you needs improvement. But I've got good news for you. So if you've never planned one of these migrations and you want to be one of the group in the corner, we have this guide that's been written by some of the experts in our business. And I've got even better news for you. If you want me to help you do a migration, I can't help you. I've never done one on my own personally, actually. But the people that have written this ebook have over a decade of experience doing migrations with some of the most gnarly Jira instances in the world. If you're going to experience it, they've probably already seen it. And some of the guidance in this ebook will help you plan for that migration. So again, if you've got your phones with you, you can go ahead and take a look, take a screenshot of that link, and I would invite you to download that ebook when you get back. And what it's going to cover is the process of planning your migration strategy. And so on the screen here, we've got all the different phases of your migration. So again, moving data, planning a migration, it's not just about moving data from A to B, it's planning that mission critical project to move your instance over to cloud. It's going to follow all these phases. In the planning phase, the ebook is going to give you some content around how do you get stakeholder buy-in and approvals. As you move into the prep phase, it includes content like checklists to help you inventory your assets and plan those requirements. Then you'll move into testing, so you'll test and you'll retest and you'll test and you'll retest. You'll test some more. Then finally, you'll go into the migration itself, which I'll cover in a second. And then the last phase is something that we don't like to think about, but it's part of the way that you'll manage your new instance. Is after you do the migration, it's not one and done. You're going to move into other phases like ongoing support and disaster recovery. And so this ebook will help you think about all those phases. So if you want to increase your odds of success and be that group in the corner, this ebook is going to be your key. So now let's talk about migration. You've done all the work, you've built the plans, you've got buy-in, you've done your checklists, you're ready to go. Now you're moving into the actual migration. So migration occurs across a broad spectrum of 3 basic chunks. On the left end is start fresh. So wiping the slate clean, just having a brand new instance. And on the far end of the spectrum is a full migration. In the middle is really what most all of you are going to do. It's the partial migration. Let's start with Start Fresh. So what does that look like? So Start Fresh is wipe the slate clean. You're going to set up your new migration, your new instance. The reality is most everybody in this room isn't going to be lucky enough to be able to do this because you've got all this legacy data and workflows and critical data in your Jira instance. But you might want to explore this if you've got performance issues with your current instance. You don't really rely on the old data that you have, and maybe your current instance is so far out of date that it's not going to make sense to try to migrate it. Again, this is a tiny fraction of what many of you will do, but it is a strategy. On the other end of the spectrum is the full migration. Now, I think this is what most people think about when they talk about migration. And I would say the biggest constraining factor in being able to do this is that are all the apps and all the features and customizations and everything that you need, is it all available in cloud? And as we all know, there are differences between the on-prem and the server, the on-prem and the cloud environment. So if you have all those compatibilities and all those requirements in place, this is the strategy that you could explore. The benefit is obviously you're going to keep all the data. The teams that are using this as a tool, they already know how it works. You're not going to have to retrain them. So it's really a good option. It's going to make everything look like it was between the source and the destination. But where most of you are going to end up is in this last bucket, which is the partial migration. So the analogy you can think about here is if you're moving houses. How many of you have moved in your lifetime? Once or twice? All right. So what do you do when you move? I know for me, I go through all the boxes in my garage. I'm like, here's a bunch of stuff I haven't touched since the last time I moved. Throw that stuff away. Here's a bunch of boxes I don't need anymore. Donate those, sell those off. You don't want to take all your old junk and move it into your shiny new cloud instance. Or in some cases, you're going to take multiple instances and you're going to say, I'm going to consolidate these. I don't need 20 different instances. And so this is where you start to get into the partial migration. And the benefits are you can start to improve your strategy to do things that you wish you would have done differently from the first time around. You can clean up some of that old data. You can consolidate instances. And also, talking about critical infrastructure, you can start to move those instances in phases to minimize disruption with the current business. And so this is really probably what 95% of you are going to do is the partial migration. So the last piece about how you're going to actually execute your migration, remember I said I want to give you some resources. So my first piece of advice is going to be, we've got an awesome community of partners here in the Atlassian ecosystem. These are people that live and breathe migration every single day. I would definitely call them and consider using them. If you're not going to use the partners and you want to go it on your own, there's a number of different apps that allow you to do migration. So the Jira Site Import, Jira Cloud Migration Assistant, and then one of Appfire's apps, which I'm partial towards, Configuration Manager for Jira. And I promise I won't give you a commercial for our apps, but I'm going to give you a commercial for our app. So the thing where CMJ really shines is, unlike a lot of other tools that treat migration as a moving data from A to B problem, CMJ has been designed to treat migration as a promotion of change. So where it shines is with these complex migrations, where it helps you as the person who's ultimately responsible, trying to get in the back corner of the 20% success cases. What it's going to help you to do is understand the impact of the changes before you make them. It's going to help you and enable you to do data transformations. So if you want to clean up some of that data, you can transform the data both in ways that you want to, but also understanding some of those differences between the on-prem and the cloud, and we'll do those transformations for you magically. And then once you're in cloud, it will eventually enable you to start to manage those migrations, manage that instance, and as things continue to change, you can use this as a tool to manage your configuration changes. So these are the apps. So like I said, as you're considering your migration, I would invite you to check all of these out. And with that, I just want to thank you for listening to today's talk. And those links that I shared throughout the presentation, I'm going to leave those up on the screen, and you can explore those at your own. I'll turn it back over to our host.
Thank you. Thank you.